Good morning. My name is Theo Edmonds, and I am with Josh Miller, one of the co-founders of Ideas. We're an artist-led, entrepreneur-focused, creative chamber of commerce right here in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you for joining us for Week 6 of the Who's Louisville webcast. Each week, we're looking at Louisville through a different lens, actively engaged in making our city a better and more vibrant place to live. Today we're joined with Cathe Dykstra, Family Scholar House. Good morning, Cathe.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So we always start with the first question of this show with the title, Who is Louisville from your point of view right now?
From my point of view, Louisville right now is a really creative place where you can explore and experiment and fail big.
Isn't that special?
It is, because that you learn so much more from the failures than the successes. That's not just a throwaway line your teachers give you when you get a D. That really is true, and the opportunity to be creative and innovative here is special.
What are the implications for success that are found in failure?
Well, one of the first things is to let go of any kind of blame. So one of the things we've done with our participants and with our staff at Family Scholar House is create a blame-free zone. I've found that people are much more innovative if they're not worried about what will happen if they fail. So if you let go of then you can try new things, and there's no emotion attached to the failure. There's no oh my God, I messed up so bad, you know. So you go, okay, so what do we learn? And then that then leads you to that next level of growth. Whereas if you're stuck in the blame, it stops there. You know, you spend all your time trying to figure out how to blame it on somebody else.
Educational systems, and both at the lower level, even up, the higher ed level, that we have in some ways cultivated a culture of anti-failure, where students are exactly what you have just described, afraid to fail.
Right.
And I think there's an active conversation that is starting to be around this topic, and that's very encouraging to hear, is that we realize that large systems can also fail, and in that is a learning on some level too.
But even something that works right now won't work for forever.
Of course.
A few years ago, more than I'd like to admit, I was in Bingham Fellows, and they showed us 2 videos, and one was of a 4th grade math class in the United States, and the other was of a 4th grade math class in an Asian country, and we watched the differences in the interaction between the teachers and the students, and this is not an indictment of all schools, but in this particular American classroom, the teacher was teaching to the answer. So she, get the answer, and then when they didn't, she was like, well, but that's not the answer, and everything was about the answer. And in the other video, we watched the teacher walk around and look over papers, and I picked up his phrase because it was so beautiful. He said, you're getting stuck in a good place. And it was the whole idea that if you get stuck and then you get yourself out of it, you're learning so much more than if you get the right answer.
Sometimes it is just finding the right question that is the most important thing, right?
It is.
Tell us about Family Scholar House.
So at Family Scholar House, we provide housing and educational support for single-parent college students. And our whole focus is on not only breaking the cycle of poverty, but transforming our community through education. And the form that takes is programming that starts at age 2 and works with women who are pregnant, and we have single fathers as well, but sees them all the way through the continuum so that they are getting an education, but they're also empowering their children to get the most out of their own education so that the path is different. Right. Within 90 days of graduating from college and then graduating from our program and exiting, 70% of our graduates are off of all government assistance. Wow. So they really are in a different place and able to parent their children and provide enriching experiences for their children that are very different from what was provided for them.
What's the average time that a person and a family is with Family Scholar?
3.5 years is the average. Now, some people get a 2-year college degree, and some people get a 4-year college degree, and some people come in having already done some college credit, often not well, and some people are starting fresh. So there is a wide range, but that average is 3.5 years.
And do you guys offer not only some of the obvious supports, but also maybe things in terms of life skills training, such as financial stewardship and those types of things?
We do. Before you can move in, you've had 8 classes, 4 in financial education and 4 in related things like understanding accreditation and understanding the FAFSA form, and that's a requirement to move in. Our pre-residential program, they all receive services while they're waiting for housing and childcare. Right now today there's 939 families on that waiting list. 215 families live with us with 324 children. So you can tell people you've met the knots in the shoe. But those families that are waiting, that is a merit-based program. They are working their way into housing so that we take the folks that are most ready to succeed.
That's wonderful. Now, you were telling me before we turned on that Family Scholar is part of a national network.
So we started Family Scholar House US. It's sort of naive.
You started at the Louisville location, started the national.
Correct.
Okay.
What happened is we went and met with the Department of Education in DC, and we just thought every community had one of these. And I know how naive that sounds, but we knew how needed it was, so we just imagined that every community had something like this. And they were just sort of dumbfounded. They're like, well, there are other places that do pieces and parts of what you do, but the comprehensive, holistic programming that includes childcare and housing and transportation and basic life skills and all of that, we are not aware of anybody else who does it in this comprehensive way. And they started telling people that. And so then I started getting all these phone calls. I got one yesterday from Savannah, Georgia. I started getting all these phone calls of people, how would you help us do this? And so when you're getting a lot of phone calls, I'm sure other people have had this situation. I can't remember if I told New Jersey the same thing I told Georgia.
Right.
You know, and so then I'm talking to Texas, and then I'm talking to Kansas, and so we formalized it to make sure that we were giving everybody the same information. And in formalizing it, we recognized the opportunity to brand, let them own it in their own community so that their community supported it, but provide them with the technical assistance to do what we were doing and do it well, because we know where we stubbed our toe. And we don't want them to stub their toe in the same spot. We want them to get stuck in a good spot too, not the same one we got stuck in.
Can you give us an example of like your process for, you say you formalized it, because I think this is something that a lot of us here in Louisville in different ways are thinking about, because there is something unique about Louisville. We have a lot of really unique, let's call it social entrepreneurship programs that are going on that are looking at things that maybe have always traditionally been in just the nonprofit world, but we're doing them in these holistic and sustainable ways that aren't occurring necessarily in other parts of the country.
So when we wanted to formalize it, we copyrighted our materials, we created a big binder, we stepped back. And we have a very small staff. I mean, last year we served 2,479 families with 12 paid staff, 1,531 volunteers. So the community can say that they own this. They are good stewards of this. But we stepped back and thought, okay, if we didn't know what we knew, what questions would we have? What would we need in order to be able to understand this? So let me give you a little example. We do toddler book club. For some people that's like, oh, okay, yeah, toddler book club, it's a reading program. But that's not how it started. What happened, I'm Mother Read certified program in North Carolina, and I'd sent some staff to that. But what we kept finding was we had adults that were not read to as children. So when they went to read to their own children, wanting very much to engage with their children around the story, they didn't know how to read to their children. So they just read the book as fast as they could. They didn't stop and say, how many butterflies do you count on this page? Or what do you think that the bumblebee's thinking? You know, not bringing the story to life. And so their children were missing out on the opportunity to use their imagination, to, instead of seeing it as the story, see it as, where am I in the story? We have a little girl who always says, she'll interrupt you and say, now where am I in this story?
That's great.
Which is a wonderful to feel connected to it. So it's just so condescending if I said, Theo, let me teach you how to read to your child. Oh my gosh, we don't do that. What we did was model it. We brought in people from the community who'd been read to and read to their children, and created an environment where they're learning from each other and modeling things that for each other, and then replicating and duplicating things that they've seen. And so this environment bred an interest in books in very young children, so that they want to learn to read because they want to be able to do what's being done for them.
Right.
We also found that the adults reconnected with reading. Not reading for not textbook reading for school, but reading for pleasure, reading for a personal development and exploration. And that's why Toddler Book Club is a core program in the affiliate model, because we know how rich that opportunity is for the family, not just for a child who's 2 to 6 and doesn't yet read for themselves.
What are some of the biggest the kids in your program are teaching you?
Gosh, I learn from them every day. I think one of the things that I'm learning from our children, not just from our adult students, but from our little kids, is how to say I don't know. So I was one of my little boys with the snow. Snow's tough for us. Snow days are tough for us. That's 2 hot meals that my kids miss every day that they're out of school.
Yeah.
So they missed 11 meals the last round. That's not good. So they come over a lot, and we're doing everything we can to supplement their food, and kids shoveling snow and all kinds of stuff. But one of my little boys came over, and he was telling me that he was in an automobile accident when he was a kid, and that as part of that, I think he's in the 4th grade, he'll be getting money, like he gets $10,000 when he's 18. And I said, well, that's great, that'll help you go to college. And we were talking about that, and I said, now is that money invested? And he said, don't know what that means. And the fact that he could say, I don't know what that means, opened us up to a whole new conversation. He could have just said, I'm sure it is. But he didn't know what that meant. So he wanted to learn. And so that hunger to learn, it doesn't stop because he graduates from high school. We want to be hungry for knowledge all along.
What are some of these other opportunities for knowledge transfer within your organization? Because I'm hearing a lot of that.
There is.
And talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think it's less important. I mean, we'd certainly do it within our organization, but where it's even more important is between organizations. So being a part, we don't replicate things that are done with excellence in our community. So if it's done well by somebody else, why on earth would we do it? Why not we bring them in to do it? So when we looked at our family cafe, which is, as far as we know, the only one of its kind in the country that is a partnership with Dare to Care, why would I find a way to cook food for our families in the community when Dare to Care does that?
Right.
They're good at it. They have a chef. They're good at it. So let's partner with them to do something creative and innovative. And initially, there were a lot of roadblocks that I told you earlier. There were a lot of roadblocks around funding, and people get stopped there. They say, "Well, but the USDA won't pay you to do it that way." I'm like, "Well, why do we have to rely on the USDA?" I'm like, other people have money too. So we looked at how we could do it the way we wanted to do it, with private funding, and now we're looking at other communities, just like we did with Family Scholar House Model. We're saying, gosh, we want that experience, and how can we help them replicate that model?
That's great. Collaboration is so important on so many levels, from the personal to the public to the private. It just seems to be not only a term that's in vogue right now, but actually it's becoming ingrained into people's way of thinking of that there's no more of this, we do it by ourselves. That kind of approach. What are you seeing at the national level around this topic of collaboration that you think that maybe Louisville could learn from?
Well, I think Louisville's contributed to it in ways that we didn't even realize. For instance, Code Louisville and Tech Hire, and the White House announced. I mean, that they're using what we've learned from Code Louisville for a national rollout model is amazing.
For those that may not be familiar with Code Louisville, can you?
Oh my gosh, I'm going to get in deep water really fast. So Code Louisville was a way for us to address the need for 21st century tech jobs to be filled by employees. We had a whole lot of jobs that particularly up and down Main Street, were not getting filled because we didn't have qualified folks. And so it was a way to create sort of a boot camp environment to get them some training so that they would then be qualified for those jobs and to build interest in those jobs and awareness of those jobs.
Right.
So now the White House is doing Tech Hire, which has some similar components, and it's included, you know, our mayor being a part of that, and, you know, from Kentucky, you know, where we actually do wear shoes, really cool shoes even, and, you know, and so it's important that people see Kentucky in a different light.
I agree.
That those things are coming from us. So I think we give in that way. One of the challenges I have with collaboration is when people looking desperately for a synonym fill-in partner, and it's not the same thing.
It's not.
It's not the. It's not compromise. For me, compromise is often everybody got less than what they wanted.
Right.
Collaboration is, where do we have shared goals? We could disagree on a whole bunch of other things, but if we agree on this one little piece, what can we do about that one little piece where we have a shared goal? And that has led us to look at, in anything we're doing, just who are the natural stakeholders and the natural people that we would talk to about a collaboration, but who are the most unlikely. And so when I'm talking to other communities, I say, okay, you've made this list of people that are just like you and agree with everything you agree with. Now make me the list of people who are very different from you, but still believe that this is the right thing to do. With Family Scholar House, there are people who are very invested in us because they want to help others. They believe everybody deserves a chance. There are other people who are very invested in the work we do because it's cheaper than what we currently do with folks who can't make it. So instead of giving them fish over and over and over again, and you know I hear that fish thing all the time, it's not just that we teach to fish, we help them buy a fishing license and show them where the lakes are, and then aspire to transform the fishing industry. So, you know, how can we get both, all the people who want to be good neighbors, and the people who want to be good investors? How do we bring them together around a shared goal? And we've been able to do that. We used to do even more of that.
Can you give an example of
well, I think, you know, sometimes we get stuck in the partisan stuff. And I'm blessed to have friends on both sides of the aisle. It's interesting because they both claim us, you know. I hear all kinds of crazy things. So, like, you know, it's just really interesting. But they agree about this. And I relations with them that these are wonderful community leaders who agree about way more than they disagree about. So I wish that they would do even more of that. An example would be LIFT, Local Investments for Transformation. What's the deal? Why are we not all in favor of this? What, you know, I hear the tax thing, but
listening that aren't familiar with our local politics as much, would you describe LIFT for us?
So again, deep water, really fast. The whole idea is that with the approval from the legislature, with that change at the state level, local communities would be able to vote on each individual project that they want to fund. And then that would add up to a penny of sales tax for a period of time that would then sunset when the project is paid for. An example would be...
It's crowdfunding.
Exactly. It's crowdfunding at the government level.
Yeah.
Of course, that probably means it's more expensive than, you know, the way we would do it is crowdfunding. But, like, we want to extend the waterfront into Portland because Gil's doing amazing things in Portland. If we want to extend the waterfront into Portland, the opportunity for us to fund that could come from something like LIFT. The opportunity for us to do more parks. The opportunity for us to invest in infrastructure. But the decision would be made by citizens here, not anywhere else. And if they didn't approve it, it wouldn't go through.
Right.
It is the way I do my budget at home. It's the way my husband and I make decisions. So why wouldn't we want to do that at the state level? Regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, why don't you want people to have the opportunity to make a decision about what it is we fund in our community? for a period of time
Right.
that then sunsets. It's not a permanent tax.
What are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges in funding for programs like Family Scholar House these days?
I think some donors are just tired. They're tired because the needs are so great, and you struggle between, we've really focused heavily on shifting the paradigm from short-term assistance to long-term solutions. That doesn't mean short-term assistance is not needed, but how do you balance those? How do you balance the need for short-term assistance, feed people today, and the need for them to have the kind of skills that they need to feed themselves for a lifetime? And this relates to what I think is one of the biggest tragedies we have right now, which is the increase in violence. It's easy to say, well, mandatory sentencing, everybody go to jail, stay there for 85%. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And we'll lose a whole generation of people, and they're not replaceable. So when, there's going to come a day when I'm in the home being pushed in a little chair down the hallway, and I still will be wearing really cool shoes, but other people are going to be leading our community and making decisions, and we need those people. And so we need to provide them with the opportunities, the enrichment experiences, the education that they need to be prepared to lead.
Absolutely.
When that day comes. It's easy to say, well, those problems are in the West End. But if I have a really bad cut on my leg and it gets infected, it's a problem for my whole body. And this whole community is suffering because of the increase in violence. And for those who don't know, we've had more than 20 murders so far. This point last year, we had 4 or 5.
That's a great analogy used, and it's one that I use quite often, even in regards to the arts, because arts and culture are our wheelhouse. Now, we're using it to do very new things with it, but I often tell people that anytime that if you look at the city of Louisville as a body, and we're not a third of our body to its fullest capacity and taking care of it, then it's going to throw our whole system off, and we'll never really realize the possibility.
Right.
That's our possibility city.
Absolutely.
We'll never really realize the possibility that we truly have in front of us. The good news there again is there seems to be a cross coalition. They're sitting at the table, making space in their own viewpoints for other viewpoints to come in there, and that's a great place to start.
Right.
And that seems to be a very intentional thing that's going on from kitchens to
right.
To City Hall.
Right. I'm a big proponent of the arts. That sometimes surprises people. I remember having a conversation with a donor a few years ago, and she said, instead of fund for the arts. I said, you shouldn't. And it stopped her because she was prepared for me to argue that human service is more valuable or what we do is more meaningful. And that's not true. We need it all. We need it all.
Yes.
We make sure our folks have enriching experiences in the arts because that leads them to be more creative. It's important to be able to read and write, but if you don't have art, you don't have anything to read or write about. So, how do we bring joy back? Well, we have to have art to do that. We're not inchworms. We don't just, eat dirt and poop dirt. We have something to look forward to, and art is so much a part of that. And so, experience. And so when we looked to do a STEM program, we quickly made it STEAM, even so that our children would see the relevance of art in their curriculum.
We're funding right now through our Art Place grant a group of young artists in Smoketown called the STEAM Exchange, and they're using art to teach science, technology, engineering, and math to the kids there in Smoketown, both at Youth Builds program and throughout the community. And it's become a very successful program very quickly because it works. And one of the things that I think that across the country that we've made a mistake on is segmenting arts and culture as this thing that sits over here on the side of everything else, and even
like
from
dessert.
And even
it's
from
not the meal; it's dessert.
Right. And so what we realize now that's not the right way to look at it. That arts and culture go across every major and impact every major area of the city. And as a city or as a business, if you're developing any initiative, why don't you have the creative mind sitting at the table with finance and operations and urban planning and all of these
Right.
other things that you consider core
Right.
values? Because the creative mind is just that. It's a creative mind. It's a thing that helps you ask that question, right? You know, we talk about getting to the right question.
Right.
And when you activate the creative process, what you're really activating is this holistic, interdisciplinary way of thinking about the world.
Right.
And how valuable would that be to have, you know, in any conversation?
Well, it would solve a lot of the problems, but more importantly, it would lead us to understand what the problems are.
And maybe even identify new options that we didn't even
Right.
think were
Right.
there.
Right. You know, so what if we did it this way? What if we tried this? What if we looked at it from a different perspective? It's, you know, really important that we have a different group of people around the table. One of the real pleasures I had was being involved with Vision Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to lead, I was the team lead of the of the living focus team, which is better than dead all day long and every day. But that gave housing. And I felt like our team did something that was especially creative that we then shared with the whole group. We created a worksheet for children. 25 years from now, children will be adults and will be leading our community. And we felt like if we didn't ask for their input, it would be really hard for them later to feel like they were bought into it. Because so now they could sit, you know, 25 years, they could say, well, they asked me, you know, some of these ideas came from me. And there were some really interesting learnings that came from that. But one of the cool things we did is the last question, they drew their vision, they talked about what they liked. There were some really tragic answers. But one of the last questions we asked was, what was your favorite flavor of ice cream? And a lot of people, you know, why are you asking that? We were actually able to sort those and put all the vanillas in a group, and then things like bubble gum with sprinkles and chocolate chip mint with strawberry jam, and see the difference in the creativity of the vanillas, just plain, and where they were putting, you know, sprinkles on bubblegum ice cream. And it was really cool to see how creative they were in their answers when they were more creative in even the flavor of ice cream they liked. Isn't that fun?
It is fun. And what are the implications of that type of creative thinking on of a city?
You don't have Family Scholar House without it.
Right.
You don't have a Family Cafe with Dare to Care without it. You probably don't have Youth Build without it.
Why not?
Because it's not vanilla. It would have been easy for somebody else to be stopped when they said, well, the USDA doesn't fund it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we can't do it. Why can't we do it? You know, so it's looking at it a different way. When you have people who think, I hate that expression, outside the box, get them all the way outside of the warehouse, you know, get them somewhere else, get them down to the waterfront. When you have people who think differently, they come up with not just different answers, but as you said, different questions that lead us in a whole different place.
One of my favorite definitions I've ever heard of art, and we applied to artists, is that it is a catalytic force that allows options to become visible.
Ooh, I like that.
And isn't that great? And that's that's just that's a skill set. That's not describing something that hangs on a wall. That's not describing a sculpture of of an old dead guy out in the middle of a park. That's describing and thinking about the world.
Right. Well, and you probably hear this all the time: good art, bad art.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you judge that? It's personal. What you might like is not necessarily what I might like, and what I find value in, somebody else might not find value in. But it's not that there is a good type in and of itself is good and meaningful and valuable because it is an exploration. I don't know many artists who are happy with what they, like they paint it and then they go, but next time I would do this.
Yeah.
And that's part of that growing, that part of that evolving.
In thinking about this, I think one of the things that, because we work a lot with artists and engage in in municipal systems, we engage in corporate systems. It's a direct form of engagement where we're bringing the creative mind to the table to work on problems that have an opportunity nothing to do related with art. And what we've often found in these early learnings of these prototypes we're doing is that business, municipal systems, all this stuff, it's a very linear process, right? And creative thinking is just not. It's an exponential process. And you consider the world we're living in today where, you know, you go back a couple of thousand years, a grandmother and her great-great-great-granddaughter could expect to live more or less the same life because our world, well, human development was linear and local. And now, you know, a mother and her daughter, because of technology, can be expected to live in some ways a radically different, you know, day-to-day life. So when we think about the future, when we think about what the implications are for the future, given the rapid pace of technology and how it's impacting our world and so forth. The flattening of it all. It seems to me that we would absolutely be wanting every creative mind to help us think about the future as possible at the table. But when you get them at the table, what we've also found, and I'm coming back to this leading to a question, what we found is when you get the creative mind at the table, even the most ardent supporters of having that creative mind come to the table with them, very quickly put that creative mind into a box that says, you're here as, you know, to put the window dressing on it, you're here to give it a little flavor, you're here to do a lot of things, but certainly not to impact the way we're really fundamentally thinking about the systemic issue.
That's unfortunate.
So how have you in Family Scholar House, or even in other organizations locally or nationally that you've looked at, how has creativity been used, and artists been used to move an organization forward that has really fundamentally impacted its path to success?
Well, I think that the first thing is you don't put them in the box. You don't have people have roles. Like, okay, you're here, you know, for this, or you're here for this. Like my construction and development team, they contribute in many more ways than just what color brick we use or how big should the apartments be. I mean, they bring real meaning to creating a community, not just a campus, but a community by the way they contribute to that. Now, if I limited them, we would not be nearly as successful or have as rich of an environment as we have. So it's getting rid of those, like, you're here for this. It's saying, well, we all have a shared goal. More often than I've seen it work. Because I've seen the same thing you were talking about. Well, you're here, you know, to make it pretty.
Yeah.
Here, we would like for you to look at the finishes on the building. You take the art person and say, help me with the finishes. And that's not meaningful to them or to us. And so the projects that I've seen that have been successful break down 13 different colleges and universities here. And some are more siloed than others. And it's not just size, it's just by ideology. And it's surprising sometimes when people within one school will ask us to introduce them to people within the same school in a different, because they don't have those relationships. What a shame. Now, I'm grateful that they ask us because we can do that. But they're in the same institution and don't have relationships that we have with both. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's unfortunate for the organization. Yeah, that they're built like that, because that is an organization that quite possibly is going to be disrupted by somebody else because they're not even talking with inside of their own organization.
Right. And I love the word you use, disrupted, because you know the whole idea of disruption, growth could happen there.
Absolutely.
And that's what we have to hope for. We have to hope that disruption, growth, maybe even a big failure, which would be kind of awesome, because then they would learn from that too. You know, how can we fail big? And then
as long as it's a smart failure and it's intentional and there was a calculated risk that was taken toward a productive outcome. Right.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, in a lot of the work that we do, we're catalytic prototypes that we're doing here because you can work with a big idea, but in a small way, and so the risk profile is not that huge, but the benefit profile, if you do succeed, is massive and it's transformational. And we've got a portfolio of those that we're working on. And I've noticed in looking at the Family Scholar House that you all work in much the same way. It's almost like you have a portfolio of strategies. So yes, there's what Family Scholar House is on paper,
Right.
but it's so much more than that.
It is.
How do you?
Because not everything works for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
How do you manage that portfolio of strategies from an executive standpoint and create a team that works together across those platforms?
Well, part of it is that blame-free environment, and the other part is that I honestly just do not have the time to be a micromanager. I don't have time to do everybody else's job. I got to be busy doing my own. And so really empowering people to own an aspect or program or project or, you know, some functionality so that they can put their own spin on it and fail and learn and grow and share, and then having everybody come together and share those learnings. So, you know, when we do staff retreats, that's a meaningful exchange. It's not just report out. It's not like, okay, here's how great we are and here's what we're going to do next. It's really vibrant. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
We have 939 families on our waiting list, so a really strong argument could be made that we need to just continue to focus on those families. The reality is we've never had a time when our pre-residential program numbers went down. Open a campus, move in 50 families, and it still goes up. More visibility, it goes up. So we launched a pilot prevention program, working with youth at Maryhurst, YMCA Safe Place, and Home of the Innocents that did not have children, that were coming out of foster care, so that we could work with them before they had children. Let's, you know, try to get in front of this a little bit. So with our next campus, we're designating space to house some of the youth aging on the foster care that do not yet have children.
Such a needed thing.
I agree. But it doesn't, if you think Family Scholar House and you have in mind that this is what you're like, that doesn't fit your model. Yes, it does, because this is how we have them be part of our family before they have the family of their own and get the education they need to maybe take on some of those tech jobs or some other things. So it's really important that we're looking at that. But it would be easy to say, gosh, we've got so much on our plate, we just can't do any more or any different. Let's just do what we're doing. And that's just not who we are. That came about because we recognized what we were seeing. So many youth aging out of foster care that either had children in foster care or quickly had children after they left foster care. And so we saw an opportunity to try something new. We're going to make some mistakes. We're going to learn from those mistakes, and we're going to evolve that program. I often tell our staff, anybody can do the easy stuff. It takes leadership to do hard things.
Yes.
And we're going to step into that role.
It's such a needed program that you just described. We lose so many kids at that exact spot when they age out of foster care.
Yeah.
So I didn't know you all.
And they're
So
our next
glad to hear
generation
that.
leaders.
They are, absolutely.
Shame on us. How can we, how can we give up on a whole generation of kids that are aging out of foster care or have had a problem with substance abuse? Or, how do we do that? How do we do that? It's easy to not care about them when they're faceless for a lot of people, but then they're a member of our own family. They're a member of this family.
So I love listening to you talk because you have this spark in your eyes when you talk.
I love my family.
And what is it? Can you point to a thing or a person or an experience when you were a teenager been impactful on you that you've carried with you throughout your entire life that informs and drives the work you do today?
Well, I had just amazing parents. I was very blessed to have parents that were very active in our church and active in the community and didn't see family as just who lived in our home. Of friends and neighbors. I grew up in South Carolina at a time when not that it's any different, race is still a huge issue in this country, and we have to talk about race. We have to talk about it because prejudice is insidious. But it wasn't hidden in South Carolina in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Where you can look out the window and see it. And my parents to create an environment where our friends were of different cultures and different races and different religions, and so I was exposed to a variety of different people. But I think one of the most catalytic experiences I had was early on at Family Scholar House. We were called by a different name at that time when a young woman came in, and we chose her for the program, and she had aged out of foster care. She had gotten pregnant at 12, had her baby at 13. I was still playing with dolls at 12.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even imagine it. And she didn't have anybody in the world but us. And I was my sister's keeper. And it was important that I knew that, and that we all knew that. We needed to treat her like family from the get-go because she didn't have any other family. And so her success, is hers. She owns her success. But that we were able to clear some of the clutter out of the way so that she could focus on the things that mattered is attributable to who we became in relationship with her. Mm-hmm. And that continues to inform who we are today. For instance, Compassionate Louisville, love Compassionate Louisville. Accountability is compassionate.
Yes.
And one of the things that the mayor's done really well is helping people understand that compassion isn't soft. Isn't weakness. Compassion is really important, but it includes accountability. Mm-hmm. So on the rare occasion that I have to kick somebody out of the program, it breaks my heart. But that's the most compassionate thing to do when they're at a point where the consequences of their actions require that next step. Because to fail them there would be to continue to change the rules in a system where they're used to the rules changing. And the rules don't change much at Family Scholar House.
That's a really great way to wrap this up today. You're an amazing person, and Louisville is so lucky to have you and your team, and even more importantly, Louisville's lucky to have the young people that are coming out of your program because they are the next leaders of our city, and our city's future is going to be bright knowing that.
I feel so too.
All right, Cathe, thank you so much for this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louisville, and tune in next week when our guest will be Polish architect and artist Jakub Szczerski. He's going to be in Louisville for a second round of his engagement as an artist with General Electric's first build. So we hope you'll tune in for that. Thanks again, and take care.